It is my pleasure to introduce Jenny Lee Austria Bonifacio for the keynote address. Maybe we could have the doors closed at the ends. Jenny Lee is the author of Reuniting with Strangers. She is the founder of Filipino Talks, and she's the communication and program outreach specialist at the Together Project. Jenny Lee tells me she knows many, many, many people here today. She'll be talking today about her journey to date, working and writing about newcomers, and her presentation is entitled From School Settlement Worker to Author. And just before we get started, we'd like to say that this session is sponsored by the Calgary Catholic Immigration Society, and we'll show a very short video from CCIS.
Fostering New Beginnings, the CCIS story. Since 1981, Calgary Catholic Immigration Society, CCIS, has been a beacon of hope for refugees and immigrants in our community. We stand as a community leader, offering comprehensive services through a diverse team of dedicated professionals, serving newcomers out of 26 locations across Calgary and Southern Alberta. We are deeply rooted in the heart of our communities, ensuring accessible support for all. From employment to family and children's services, we cover it all, with over 95 programs and services tailored to every aspect of settlement and integration. Our team, a mosaic of cultures comprising more than 450 employees and 2,000 volunteers, collectively speaks more than 70 languages, ensuring every client feels heard, understood, and valued, making CCIS a beacon of diversity and inclusion. In partnership, we empower immigrants and refugees to successfully settle and integrate in our communities. Our vision is to build an inclusive society where immigrants and refugees can reach their full potential. CCIS, transforming lives, one new beginning at a time.
So again, thank you to CCIS for sponsoring this session, and over to the wonderful Jenny Lee.
Hi, everybody. I cannot tell you how much it means to be here, because honestly, I'm here as one of you. I am working in settlement. I also happen to be an author, and I just want to have a moment. Can you raise your hand if you have worked with me as in the settlement field before? I thank you for watching me grow. Thank you for helping me grow. Thank you for helping me get to this point today. I am not nervous. I am just so excited to be here. So let me, how do I go to the next? There we go. Okay. Oftentimes when people say, Jenny Lee, you're really good at public speaking, I say two things. One is I was trained by the meanest people in the world, which are newcomer students who are very disengaged. It's true. And two is overstressed teachers. If you can get the attention of those two groups, you can do anything. The second thing I say is that I come from a family of teachers. I myself am not a teacher, but my mom was one, my grandma was one. This is her scarf today. And so talking to people in big groups like this is kind of in my genes. I want to tell you a little bit about my story. In 2007, I moved to Toronto to do my master's in immigration and settlement at TMU. Did anybody else do an ISS degree here? Oh, I see a couple hands, yes. There are going to be a lot of polls today, just so you know. This is how you know I'm used to talking to students. After that, I got my absolute dream job right off the bat as a school settlement worker And this was the Northbrook Community House in Toronto. And because I am Filipino, I was put in oftentimes very Filipino schools. And I noticed that there were some problems happening that I did not expect. One was that I just didn't know, I guess what I want to say is I didn't know what I didn't know. And I'll tell you a little bit about this later, but when you work in very predominantly Filipino schools, you notice a couple of things. One is chronic disengagement. Sometimes the kids are just not coming to school, absenteeism, huge problems connecting to mom. And I was shocked. I didn't really know where this was coming from. So I thought, okay, I'm working in 3 schools a week. What I'm seeing here must be happening outside of these 3 schools, right? So then I became a researcher with the York Center for Asian Research, and we studied Filipinos in Vancouver, Winnipeg, Montreal, and Toronto to see what was the link, what was going on across our community. I'll tell you more about that later. I also became a journalist. You know when you go to the Asian grocery store and you see those dusty newspapers beside a rice bag? Yeah, it was one of those ethnic press newspapers that I worked for. But the best part was I was sent to all of these really interesting places to look at Filipino youth and what they were doing in Hawaii and then here in BC as well, and see how we could bring that back to Toronto. I want to go to the next slide. There we go. Did you know that Toronto has a little Manila? Raise your hand if you knew that Toronto has a little Manila. All right, there we go. I'm one of the tour guides. I'm part of a team of tour guides at Bathurst and Wilson in Toronto. Little Manila is not an area that a lot of you know about. It's not like you'll see a big sign that says, "Welcome to Little Manila." But it's there, and it is the most Filipino neighborhood in all of Canada. I suggest that you come on the tour one day. Half of it is sociocultural, and half of it is just eating. So, but don't come if you're vegan. I'm sorry, I don't make the rules. Following that, I became a school board consultant, doing something called Filipino Talks. And this is something that is so near and dear to my heart. Someone once said to me, I think this is why you were put on this planet, because I love doing what I do, and I'm going to tell you more about that in a second. But I'm also here today because I work at Together Project. Here's a picture with Dr. Victoria Estes. By the way, can we just give a hand to Dr. Victoria Estes for everything that she's done? And I work at Together Project, and I've been here the last couple days with all of you networking and getting business cards and trying to find out how we can support newcomers better. And I'm here today because I'm a published author. That's the last thing. Now, what I want you to know is that, is that before the book, it's like, sometimes when you meet authors in Canada, they say something really, really nice. They're like, "Oh, I went into the woods for 2 months and I came out with this book and it was a bestseller." And I'm like, that must be nice. Because honestly, everything that I've done in settlement led to a book. And you can see here, I did not expect the book to do this well. It was listed as one of the best books in Canada by the CBC. It was longlisted for Canada Reads. Last month, it was on the Toronto Book Awards. I was a finalist at the Toronto Book Awards. And, I'm not a genius. I'm really not. I think what happened was, when I was writing this book, I had 3 audiences in mind. One was teachers who want to know more about Filipinos. 2 were Filipinos. 3 were settlement workers. Because I thought, okay, being a settlement worker means that you basically have a PhD in your community, right? And the amount of empathy that you get every single day, the things that keep you up at night, those are the things that people need to know about. So I thought, maybe it can become a book. Now, I will say I was here on the opening gala night, and I did that bingo quiz with all of you, and the only square that I couldn't fill in was find someone who can name 3 Canadian authors. So now you can name 1, okay? I know that a lot of you might say, I'm too busy to read, I don't want to read, I don't like reading. The meanest review I ever got, and I haven't gotten a lot of mean reviews, was that they thought that I limited my language too much. And I said, you know what, that was on purpose, because if I'm going to be writing for newcomers and settlement workers and teachers, ESL students, it has to be accessible. The language has to be accessible, so it's a fast read. You can get through it in a day or 2. And it's written as a series of text messages, emails, resumes, to-do lists, self-help guides, because there are very easy ways, everyday ways to tell a story. And so you don't need a PhD to understand this book. But before I go there more, I am going to talk about my team. So, when I first became a settlement worker in schools, this was the community that saved me. I want to shout out Christian Medina Artiega back there, and I want to shout out Sawar Mustafa. Put up your hands and say hi. Those guys are part of this family that I had when I first moved to Toronto. And I think a lot of you feel that same way too about your settlement teams, right? This is your family. And I feel like every single time I would see these guys, I was just falling apart. You come to a new city and it's so hard, right? It's hard just trying to be that role model for the students, and you're just falling apart. And I would come to these meetings, and these guys would help pick up the pieces every single time. So I just wanted to shout that out. But in settlement work, I saw that there was something missing. And I think a lot of you can probably relate to this. You know how when you're a settlement worker, you can't do a lot of things. You can't throw a birthday party for your client. You can't go to their house at night when they're crying. You can't take them to the mosque. You can't take a day off of work and then go around public transit and show them how every single bus line works. You can't do that, but you want to. You want to so badly, right? So fast forward in my settlement career a couple of years, and I saw this posting for Together Project. And it says here, you can read it, when I saw this job posting, I couldn't help but smile, because I realized what Together Project was doing was filling in this gap. As a settlement worker, you know that some of your clients, you guys know, they need more than what you can give in that 9 to 5, right? They need you to be texting them in the middle of the night when they're just having crises. You can't be that person for every single client, or you're going to burn out. So what Together Project does is something called the Welcome Group program, where we have a client, they get referred to us, and then we give them a group. It's called a welcome group of 3 to 5 people. And we find out of our 1,400 volunteers, can you believe it? We have a team of 4 people, and we have 1,400 volunteers. Every single week we get 10, more than 10 sometimes, more applicants. And the thing is, we try to find the people that are going to be good at what that newcomer wants, right? And we're just trying to fill in the gap. We're trying to make your lives easier. And I love what I do. So you can see here 2 of the testimonials. One is from someone whose great-grandparents came as refugee newcomers. And then you can see another one from someone who came here as a newcomer herself. In that picture, you'll see me. And then also Ahmed, who came as a Palestinian refugee. So we do have refugee voices at our table. We're very proud of that. Another thing that I'm very proud of is the fact that we have all of these resources. And I encourage you to look them up at togetherproject.ca/resources, because we have an education guide, a language guide, a huge resources page. It's my baby. I put so much love into this resources page. And I hope that it helps you as well when you're trying to look for things for your clients. So, here we go. Okay, let me rewind a little bit more, though. Who here is from Sarnia? I know there are some people from Sarnia in the room. Put your hand up. Is there? No? There was one person on the first day, and I remember seeing him in the elevator, and I was so excited about it. So, Sarnia is where I was born. You may have noticed that I don't have a Filipino accent, but it's because I was born here. Sarnia, you wouldn't think is the Filipino capital of Canada, and it's not. It's located at the very bottom of Ontario. There is a chemical valley there. It's like Shell, Esso, Dow, Bayer. This is why a lot of the Filipinos came to work there initially in the 70s and the 80s. And that's why I was born in Canada. One thing I noticed when I was growing up was how good our community was doing. I'm not even part of the first generation. I consider my sister's generation, who's 7 years older than me. She's the first generation. And I remember growing up and seeing how well they were doing. Like, we're talking Filipinos getting valedictorian, student council, running for city councilor. Amazing, right? And that was what I thought was normal. But then I moved to Toronto and I thought, this is not normal. So I'm going to tell you about one story that really is kind of my why. And I know that a lot of you will relate to this story. I remember when I was a Swiss worker, and a teacher came up to me and said, you know, there's this boy, he's doing really well in my class, or he was doing really well in my class, but not anymore. He's not coming to school, he's so disengaged. Can you talk to him and find out what's happening? So I had him in my office, sat him down, and he said, do you know what I do after school? I go ride the bus all the way down to the financial district of Toronto, and I clean the bank offices with my mom and my aunts. Now, why would I try to do anything in school if this is all Filipinos do in Canada? Now, can you imagine being 19 years old? Your mom came as a caregiver. She sponsored you to come. You could do anything, and you only believe that you can be a cleaner because that is the limitation of your network. Breaks your heart, right? Absolutely breaks your heart. And this was a boy that was so smart. You could tell, like, he could do amazing things. So when we look at this community, the reason why the people in Sarnia were doing so well compared to the ones in Toronto who were newcomers was this. It was family separation due to the caregiver program. Separation is something that impacts a lot of people, and I know that in this room there are a lot of Filipinos. Raise your hand if you're Filipino. Can I just see? Hey, mga kababayan ko. So, the idea, though, that when we work with Filipino newcomers, oftentimes they've been separated from their families. That's something that's not new to any of you, and I know that. So, can I go backwards a slide? Sorry, I switched, but maybe I'll go there. I know that. So, I have two recommendations for settlement agencies. One, how many of you here today are the children of immigrants? You're a Canadian-born child of immigrants. Raise your hand really high, really high. Wiggle your hands a little bit. Oh my gosh, you're my people too. I often get asked to be on hiring committees for settlement workers, and oftentimes it says in the job description, must be fluent in Tagalog or another Filipino dialect. The thing is, though, is that really the most important thing? I have seen people in these hiring committees who come and they speak the language fluently. They're so good at it, but they don't have empathy. They will come to those hiring tables and they will say things like, oh, you know, the newcomers, they can do fine if they just try harder. My kids are doctors now. I don't know why everyone else is having a hard time. Listen, we don't need people like that in settlement. Just because they can speak a language doesn't mean that they have the heart for it, right? So my argument today is Don't overlook the people who are born in Canada. Just because we're not fluent in a language doesn't mean that we cannot contribute to this sector. The reason why I'm even saying this is because, flashback to that boy, right, that was working as a cleaner at nighttime. The problem with him was that he didn't have a network. What Canadian-born people can bring is networks, right? If he wants to meet a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer from our community, we can do that kind of thing. We have that as a superpower. So please let yourselves, take that in today. A second thing I would like to say, and this is on behalf of the Filipino workers in the room, because this is something that we talk about a lot in our community. When we have a Filipino worker, oftentimes you'll see them in a school, for instance, or in a library. They get all the Filipinos, there's all these events happening, the bridges are being built, it's amazing. And then the managers of those programs will say, oh, they're doing such a good job. Let me pull them out, put them somewhere else, and we'll just put in anybody who speaks English, because Filipino newcomers speak English. It'll be fine, it's the same thing. The Filipino workers in this room, we all know that that is not the same thing. Our community deserves to be served by the people who come from our culture. And I say this because we have something called kapwa. Kapwa is not even a word that translates into English properly. But it's the idea that we have this sense of community and is very, very deep, a shared identity. And so just because the Filipino newcomers often speak English, it doesn't mean that we are replaceable with people from other communities. And I hope that the hiring communities in this room appreciate this point. Now, my question for settlement staff is, what kind of bridge can you build? So I'm going to talk right now about my passion project, which is Filipino Talks. So after 6 years of working as a Swiss worker, I started consulting in school boards. I wanted to build bridges between educators and Filipino newcomer families. And I thought, okay, what can I do and to collaborate, right? So you'll see here, Filipino Talks is an initiative that collaborates with a lot of different people. School boards and educators and settlement workers and newcomer students and newcomer parents, artists, professional role models, bring in all of the people into these schools with really high needs, high newcomer populations. Let me show you in 4 easy steps how this is done. And maybe it'll inspire you to make your own passion project. So step 1, I have a rule. I don't go into a school without surveying the Filipino youth. The reason why is because this is your battle armor. Oftentimes, I'm in a room just like this, and it's full of teachers. They are very busy people, I understand, so I think, okay, I need to get their attention, and I need to get it fast. I'm not going to show them data from students that are not theirs. That doesn't matter. They don't care as much as if they came from their own school, right? So I work with the school staff, and I survey the kids, right? And the survey is like, how many years were you separated from your mom, from your dad? What can your school do better for you? Have you experienced racism in your school? Are you part of any community group inside or outside of this school? What is your life like? And that is the survey that gets passed around. I collect all the data. And you can see here, 1,200 Filipino Talks students later. There's a lot of data there. So here is some of the data that I've taken from the students, sharing with you now. Because of the caregiver program, a lot of the students were separated from their moms. You can see here that it peaks at 8 years. This is not something that will surprise a lot of you, but I say that it surprises a lot of teachers. Oftentimes, teachers think that we were separated from our mothers for maybe 1 year or 2. You can see, though, that the graph goes all the way up to 20 years. Mind you, these are high school students. Can you imagine being separated from your mom for 20 years? That means you were born and then she was gone. Of course, when you come to Canada, it's going to be a hard time. She is a stranger, right? Now, you might be thinking, okay, generally, we know about the caregiver moms. This is not something new to us. Let me talk about the dads now. So it's a little bit different. You can see here that it peaks at under 1 year, which is great. Sometimes those are short-term contracts, often in the Middle East, doing construction work. Sometimes they're cruise ship workers as well. But I'm going to show you this exact same graph in the next slide, but with one extra data point. So watch carefully. And you'll see here, no relationship. No relationship whatsoever. Oftentimes, when we work with the Filipino community, people ask, what about the boys? What's happening with the boys? And this is what's happening with the boys, a lack of father figures. If you are a settlement worker and you are in a position to be a father figure to one of those newcomer students, I commend you, because we clearly need that in our community. Now, let me talk about step 2. Step 2 is share the data with the youth through a bunch of different workshops. 1 is reunification issues. 2 is role models. And 3 is community involvement. So what I do is I bring in all of these role models in different fields that the kids want to meet. I ask them in the survey, what do you want to be when you're older? Because 64% of them said, you can see in that slide, they don't know anyone in their dream career. If you've never seen anybody doing what you want to do in the future, that's really hard, right? So why not bring in those people? Also, bring in the community workers. So all the frontline workers in that school's area, like, oh my gosh, for instance, like the YMCA, for instance, right? Bring them in, and then they can recruit right there out of that group. Step 3, and this is the one where I say, I make teachers cry. I do, because there's this one project that I do with the kids. So I tell all the kids, listen, I know you're struggling with your mom, so let's write a letter to her. Everybody, write a letter to your mom. It's not going to be sent to her, so don't worry. Write anything you want, anything. And so the kids usually write, Dear Mama, I hate you. I hate this school. I hate this country. I want to go home. Usually that's what the letter says. Breaks your heart, right? So then I say, okay, kids, flip that letter over, pretend to be your mom. What would your mom say if she received that letter from you? Now, the kids know what mom wants to say, right? They know. So they write, Dear anak. Anak means child. We don't have words for son and daughter, just child. Dear anak, I'm so sorry you feel this way. You know I've sacrificed so much for your future. Everything I've done is for you. I understand that you're hurting. Let's talk. Let's spend time together. Let's heal. Love, Mama. So then what happens is I take all the letters home for the weekend and I read them and I sob my eyes out, as you can imagine. I always call my mom too in the middle of that, and I'm like, Mom, I'm so sorry for everything I've ever done to you. And she's like, Jen, I hate you do this, make you crazy every time. Hate these project letters to Mama. And I'm just, all the big feelings, you guys know. So then I take one line of every single letter to Mama from every single kid, and one line back to anak, dear anak. So that way the kids, later on, when they see this big video, they see everyone is going through the same thing. We're building community. Oftentimes the kids don't know that everyone else is struggling too, right? Because people have told them, you should be grateful to be in Canada. Your mom did so much for you. But the kids, they need that moment of thinking, oh my gosh, we're all the same. So if you want to see an example one, I won't show it to you today because you're all going to end up crying. But here is the link to that. You can see one there. Step 4 is the last step, which is I talk to the staff. Because honestly, the problem with the community is not always with the youth. It's sometimes the school staff, right? They don't know what they don't know. It's not their fault. We have to tell them. So I come in and I bring in like all of the data that I got from the kids. I show them the video and then really important solutions. And this is what really the teachers need the most, which is who are the guest speakers you could book? Who are the frontline workers in the area that you could bring in? What are the field trips you can go on? What books should you buy? Even how to pronounce Filipino names, which is funny. If you're curious about that, I'll show you the next slide. So, actually, wouldn't that be a fun activity? Okay. This is how to pronounce Filipino names. If you see the letter A, it always sounds like A-H, just like you say Manila. Everyone say it, 3, 2, 1, Manila. There you go. So, there's only one rule. You can do this. I know you can. So, therefore, the first name on this list is therefore not Maricar Mag Pante. It is not Maricar Mag Pante. It's therefore, we sound it out. A, right? Ah. Maricar Mag Pantay. Do you see what I did there? So it looks like Tay, like Taylor, but it's not. It's Thai, like Thailand. You can do this. Next one. I'm going to make you do all of them, by the way, because I feel like we're here. Let's do this. So next one. It's not Avon Galang. It's not Avon Galang. It's Ivan Galang. Galang. Do you see? You guys get it? Third one. One more. It's not Bayani Meg Say Say. What is it? Oh. Wow. I'm going to make you do it all together. 3, 2, 1. Okay, A plus. A plus to all of you. I really appreciate that because it's not hard. It's not a hard thing to learn, and honestly, it works for other communities as well. So, other things that I share to teachers is this: curriculum. That's what the teachers need, right? There are curriculum packs that exist for the Filipino-Canadian community. I'm sure they exist for other communities as well. Give those to the teachers. Here's one. It's called Pasok Project, and it was done by the York Center for Asian Research and the Toronto Catholic District School Board. And you can see here how good it is. There's social studies, geography, dance, English, civics, different grades. All they have to do is download it. It's totally free. We don't have to start from scratch. Oftentimes teachers think, it's hard to reach communities because we don't have the resources. Well, you can't say that anymore. So this is what they want from us. This is what they want from settlement. Teachers want to know what we already have, right? Now, let me talk about one thing, which is something that we all can relate to. You know how at the end of the night, you've gone home, you closed your laptop, the phone is off, you're done for that one night. But what happens? You lie in bed and you start thinking about all of the cases, all of the clients. What could I have done better? What could I have said? What resources exist? What doesn't exist? What can we make? And it just rolls and rolls and rolls in your head at nighttime, and you can't sleep. And I noticed even some of you last night, because I see some of you doing your casework right now. I understand. I'm literally one of you. And the thing is that for me, self-care looked like writing. What does your self-care look like? Is it painting? Is it music? Is it dance? What is that thing you do at the end of the night that makes you calm down, fall asleep? Don't say it's doom scrolling on your phone because that won't let you sleep at all. I know we all do it. For me, it was writing, and I would just sit there with my notes app and be like, okay, what could I have done better? What is that thing that the kid said to me that really bothered me? Or just the parent that really bothered me? And what can I do the next day? So this is really what inspired my debut novel. All of those nights staying up in settlement, thinking and thinking and thinking, that eventually became a book. Now, before you get at me and say, Jenna Lee, you stole all your case notes and turned it into a book, that's not true. I did not do that. What you do, especially when you work with one community for a long time, you can see the red line between all of them, right? What are the things that connect us? What are the things we have in common? That's where the story starts, okay? So when I was writing, I thought the main issue that I want people to understand is that Filipino newcomers are going through a lot. even though they often say that we're so happy, right? People always say that about the community. And like, we are a delight. Like, don't get me wrong. We are very happy people. But also, we have a lot of reasons to be upset. So, let me tell you a true story about a client that I never had. So, when I was working as a Swiss worker, I worked in a school in Toronto. On my first day there, one of the teachers said, "Oh, it's too bad you're here now because there was this family in crisis last month." And it was so upsetting because, she had come to Canada as a caregiver. Her son was 5 years old, and he was nonverbal. She was not prepared for that at all. And also, he was extremely violent, to the point where at nighttime, he would try to hurt her, hurt himself, destroy the apartment. And so her solution at nighttime was that she would call some people to help straitjacket him. Straitjacket a little boy, 5 years old, and that was the only way he would calm down. And I thought to myself, that is something I have never heard. All of my years of settlement, I've never heard of someone straitjacketing a little boy. Now let's put that aside for a second. But let's focus on the boy. Why was he so mad? That was my question. Why was he so mad? Was he exposed to violence in the Philippines? Did he ever see his mom before, like on a FaceTime call or Skype or something? Is she a total stranger to him? Is she speaking to him only in English? Does he even speak English? Does he understand what she's saying? Who dropped him off? Did they do it properly, like with a lot of preparation? Or did they just drop him off in the middle of the night and then just leave? How was he prepared to come to this country, right? And the thing is that I thought about this boy, honestly, for 10 years because I was working with all these Filipino youth, right? And the number one thing they said was, "Ate," ate means big sister, "Ate, I feel voiceless because I was never asked if I wanted to come to Canada. I was never asked if I wanted my mom to leave me behind as a little kid. I was never asked if this is where my future should be. Nobody asked me anything. I feel voiceless." Ate. So when that happens, you think to yourself, okay, I want to write a book where we talk about reunification. But I don't want it to just be moms and kids, because that is not the story. It's bigger than that. As someone who was born in Canada, I understand that even we are affected by this reunification. So I thought, okay, let's talk about the fact that there is this boy who is not technically nonverbal. And let's weave him in and out of everybody else's short stories so we can see his settlement journey over one Canadian winter, and we can see how much impact this nonverbal boy can have, even though everyone thinks he's voiceless. So it's not just moms and kids that we're talking about reunification. Let's talk about the spouses, right? 10 years apart. How are they going to love each other again? Imagine you get married at 23 and you don't see your spouse again till 33. A lot has changed. You are a different person. Is it your fault if you can't make it work? No. Let's talk about the person who was left behind in the Philippines. All of his kids have immigrated to be caregivers and students and professionals to Canada. And now he needs a caregiver. But who is going to take care of him? Let's talk about the second generation and the fact that we have a lot of issues with the fact that our parents have had to remit money for years and years and years. And then when our family comes to reunite in Canada, we're not exactly that happy to see them. What are the reasons for that? So that's really how the book goes. And I'm really proud of the fact that it doesn't take place only in Toronto, because I myself am not from Toronto. And I realized that part of being in the diaspora means that we have to recognize the diaspora outside of the major cities. Am I right? So you can see here the list of all the places where the book goes. You're going to see things that are inspired by my own family, by my own students, by my own classmates. And I wanted it to feel so real. And basically, it's your Filipino-Canadian crash course in one book. It's just the extension of what I do in Filipino Talks, trying to build empathy, right? So, I think it's time to read an excerpt of the book. And this, what I'm going to read to you, is just the first 2 pages. And actually, I'll read it from here. Reuniting with strangers. I called him Monolith because the name sounded as strong as he looked. At 13 pounds, he was the biggest baby that our tiny country hospital had ever seen. When he was coming out of me, I felt like he was ripping me in half. I begged for medicine to stop the pain, but when the nurses ran to the parking lot to ask my husband if he had any more money, they found that he spent it all on bottles of Red Horse beer. He said that since I was the one who got pregnant, I was the one who had to deal with it. I fell unconscious in a pool of blood. I knew that I needed to get my son as far away from his father as possible. So when Monolith stopped breastfeeding, I put him in my younger sister's care so I could leave the Philippines to work abroad. And as I walked away, I heard him crying out for me, but I didn't turn back. I decided that I would look forward to the day we finally reunited, to the day when it would all be worth it. 4 years later, when my sister brought Monolith to live with me in Canada, she told me not to come to the airport. Ate Vera, I'll ask my friends to drive us to your place. Before Monolith comes, clean up as much as possible. If you have breakable things, put them on the highest shelves. If you have sharp things, put them inside a locked closet. And make a big plate of eggs, garlic fried rice, and extra spam. Spam silog is Monolith's favorite. Ate, are you listening? Do you hear me? Well, I took a day off to polish the doorknobs and mirrors and every inch of my cracked parquet floors. And I fried enough spam for 6 little boys. The entire time, my face hurt from smiling. And when they arrived at my Care Street apartment, I was about to scream with joy when my sister shushed me. My baby boy was sleeping in her skinny arms, and she quickly set him down on my bed. He's 5 years old and already 55 pounds, she said, barely looking around at my freshly cleaned apartment. Her hair was so messy that it covered most of her face, and she kept pulling her sleeves down like she was cold, although the apartment was very warm. You seem tired, Sora, I said. Why don't you have a nap with him in my room? Rest ka muna. We can catch up when you're awake. My friends want me to stay with them until I fly back home tomorrow, she whispered, glancing at my son. They're still outside. I don't want to keep them waiting. I was so disappointed. I knew she had to go back to the Philippines the next day, but I wanted to stay up all night and ask about everything I'd missed in Monolith's life. I wanted to know about his goals, his dreams, his likes, his dislikes. I longed to hear every little detail. With the 12 to 13-hour time difference, there was never a good time to talk to each other. And if I texted her, she'd only say that she'd tell me everything when she saw me in person. I had been looking forward to this moment for years. Oh, at least let me take you out for lunch before you leave tomorrow, I begged. There's a Max's restaurant in Toronto, only an hour away from here. I heard their chicken tastes almost as good as it does in the Philippines. It can be our Christmas celebration. Sora glanced at Monolith, her expression inscrutable. It's too early to celebrate Christmas, she said. I'll just text you when I get back home. She thrust an Incredible Hulk backpack into my arms, kissed his cheek, and hurried away. She's probably tired from the journey, I thought. It was a 2-hour drive from our Batangas town, the Tagaytay Ridge, to the Manila airport, a 15-hour flight to Toronto, and a 30-minute drive from Pearson Airport to Oakville. 20 hours of travel would be hard on anyone. And most of all, she's probably devastated to leave her beloved nephew behind forever. Who wouldn't be? So I tucked Monolith under my covers, and I curled up next to him, breathing in his scent. He smelled like warm sun, like lush earth, like damp tropical sweat, like home. His hands were surprisingly big for his age, and I intertwined his strong fingers in mine and sighed. I had never been happier in my life. Maraming salamat po. Thank you so much.
Wow. So we have a few minutes for your questions. You can go onto Slido, ask your questions of Jenny Lee. I'm sure you have lots of questions, and you can vote on questions.
Mm-hmm. There are no silly questions. Oh, one thing I want to make sure you know before we get into the questions is that after this and during lunch, I will be signing books. The table is just at the end of the exhibitors' lounge. It's run by Massey Books, so you can see me there, okay?
Great. Questions are starting to come up. So maybe I'll read the one with the most votes so far. Thank you for sharing your stories. What are the things that have helped the youth that you work with most to feel connected to their culture and families again? Great question.
That's a great question. I'm so proud of the Filipino community. One thing that we learned when we were doing the research project with the York Center for Asian Research and studying Filipinos in Vancouver, Montreal, Winnipeg, Toronto, the thing that we were missing was role models. And ever since then, ever since we found that out and we shared that with the community, the number of role models who have stepped up and made collectives for kids that want to learn about literally anything in the arts, in engineering, in law, in medicine, community work. We have a Filipino community workers network as well. There are so many mentors that have stepped up in our community, and that is the thing that has helped the youth the most. If you're not already part of those kind of collectives in your own community, I suggest that you make one. If you don't know it exists, make it yourself, because there is such a need, not even for Filipinos only, but for your communities as well.
Great. The next question is, what advice would you give to people new to settlement? Complicated question.
I remember when I was a settlement worker the first day, and I was so scared. I walked into the school, and I wore the exact wrong outfit. Can I just say? I wore black pants and a white dress shirt. And that was the exact uniform of the kids in that school. And I went into that school, and I was barely older than a lot of those students. The thing that I was able to do, and I hope that you will too, is treat them like family, right? Treat them like family. And I'm not even just saying that as in, take care of them during your 9 to 5, but also add them on social media, especially when they're youth. And the reason why is because they need someone sometimes to help, make them feel better about what they're doing. Say they post something, they're going to go to their first job interview. You make that comment, say, I'm so proud of you, that's so great. Right? They're going to go and, apply for university. Oh my goodness, bravo, this is amazing. What you do as a settlement worker is not just that one day, right? During that one client assessment. If you can connect with them for over the years, you can see how they grow, and you can also help them as they grow, and then they can become leaders for your next batch of newcomer students. And that's what I mean by collaborating with your newcomers and making what you do sustainable.
Okay, the next question is, why do Filipino mothers choose to stay in Canada instead of returning? Are there reasons beside economic reasons?
That's a good question. Filipino mothers. There are so many Filipino mothers who have just broken hearts. You guys know, you've seen them in your agencies over and over and over again because they feel like they're torn between two families oftentimes, right? They feel that responsibility to the family that they've been taking care of in Canada, and then they feel that responsibility to the family that they're reuniting with, who has just arrived, and they've been waiting for that moment forever. And then sometimes, they're able to build that bridge and get into a bridging program, get a better job. Sometimes they're not, right? And you guys have seen this, right? When they're coming in as caregivers, they often become personal support workers, right? Which is another kind of precarious job in care work. However, if you look at what they were doing before, when they were in the Philippines, these are accountants, and these are teachers and lawyers. They were doing other things. And our bridging programs are not often reaching them. And when I talk to teachers and they say, well, how can we help all of these kids who are dropping out of school? What I say is the one thing in the domino effect, if mom can get a better job, and she can be home at nighttime, help with homework, make them go to school in the morning, be there, right? Just be there on the weekends so they can have time together. If mom can get that better job, everything else falls into place.
Thank you. I'm not sure about this next question. It says, your presentation is life-affirming. Please tell us what happened next to Monolith. Please tell us he's okay. But isn't that the whole point of your book?
So, I love a good spoiler. So I don't know what happened to the real Monolith because he wasn't a client of mine. By the time I got to that school, they'd already moved on. They'd cut ties with that school, and nobody knew. If anybody reads the book and says, this sounds familiar to one of my clients, let me know. I will give them a ton of money because I feel like, because I don't know what happened to him, I was able to just imagine his settlement journey through the different stories in Reuniting with Strangers. And I hope that the way it ends is something that really touches your heart. I have been told, though, to warn people, don't finish the book on public transit because you're going to cry and you're going to want to hug a stranger.
Okay, how can the settlement sector better support and empower long-distance parents to stay connected and engaged in their children's lives? Really important question.
That is an important question. I'm going to tell you a story. There was once a student that I had, and she was so angry because her mom had really stayed in touch with her over the years, right? A lot of text messages and emails and FaceTime calls. Her mom had really stayed in her life while she was still in the Philippines, and the mom was working in Canada. What happened was, when the girl came off the airplane at Pearson, she found that her mom was standing beside a man, a white man, didn't speak Tagalog. And the girl said, Mom, who's this? Sino ito? Sino yan? And the mom said, that's your new dad. I've remarried. You have a new sibling as well. And this is going to be your new Canadian life. And the girl was so mad. She was like, you have stayed in touch with me for years, and you never told me this. You never told me that you remarried. You never told me I have a sibling? Why would you not tell me that? And the mom said, well, I didn't want you to think I had changed too much. I wanted you to think that I'm the same as the person that I left behind, right? And I wanted you to feel like in Canada, we can still be the same, we can still be together, but the thing is you can't, right? So the answer to your question is, make sure, if you have long-distance parents and children, they're separated, make sure that those parents are truthful about what's happening. Make sure that those parents show what the inside of that apartment looks like. Even if it is a basement and they're embarrassed, that's okay. We need to be truthful about this. Have they remarried? Are there new kids involved? They need to know. Make sure that those newcomer moms especially feel like the more that your kids know, the better.
Thank you. One more question. This question says, thank you for your impactful talk and work. Settlement work has evolved greatly, yet many workers face underpayment and tough conditions. How can we better support them to ensure they have the resources and stability needed to continue serving newcomers effectively? An easy question. Right?
That's a great question. No, it's true. I think every time I come to P2P, we always talk about funding and how we are just strapped. We are overworked, and we are doing more than we can oftentimes, right? And my advice to you is, if you are feeling this in this way, right, there are a number of ways to get funding outside of government, right? There are corporations, there are family foundations. There are other ways to find the funding that you need to get what you want done. For me, and for instance, when I was doing Filipino talks, who was paying me? It wasn't my settlement agency. This is something I was doing totally on my own. By this point, I was a consultant. The school boards were paying. And someone told me once, like, if you're so mad about what's happening with the Filipinos, why don't you protest? And I said, I could protest, or I could make them pay me to come in and teach them something. And I think that's really important. So I do recommend that if there are these kind of consulting jobs for you in your own areas, seek those out. A lot of the schools are looking for you specifically. I'm not even talking just to the Filipinos. Everybody wants to know more about their community. And don't go into those presentations with this is the GDP of my country, and we're known for mining. No, they don't care. They don't want to know this. They want to know the data. Survey the kids, survey the families. Show them something that really matters, and they can't look away. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we'll have to end there, but thank you again so much. That was really touching and inspiring. I have read the book, and I agree, don't read it in public. But as Jenny Lee said, she will be signing books now in this break in the Massey table at the back of the exhibitor area. So again, thank you so much. And wow.